I still remember the way Claudia looked at me when she said it, like she was complimenting a house she was already planning to bulldoze. My name's Logan. I'm 41 years old, and I've spent the last 7 years as the chief engineer for Redstone Motors out in Bend, Oregon. Or I had, anyway, until this morning. They didn't even bother with a private office. HR booked a glass-walled conference room, where the sunlight made everything look way too calm for what was happening. I want to start by thanking you, Claudia said, folding her hands on the table like we were old friends. You've done incredible work for this company. I didn't say anything. I'd already read the room when I walked in and saw the folder waiting in front of the HR rep. There's only one kind of meeting that starts with a folder. Claudia went on, like she didn't see the tension in my shoulders. Your legacy here, those award-winning off-road designs, the Dakar wins, the Baja crowd, you made a real mark. But, I said. My voice came out flat. She didn't flinch. But we're evolving. The industry's evolving. We need leadership that reflects the future. Someone who understands the electric market, the eco-luxury rider. Performance isn't the only metric anymore. I wanted to ask her if she'd ever ridden a trail bike longer than 5 minutes. Instead, I nodded slowly. Got it. You'll receive full severance, she continued. And I really hope there are no hard feelings. No hard feelings. I've been designing bikes since I was 17. Spent the last 7 years helping pull Redstone out of its slump when they were 1/4 away from being bought out. Now I was just a line item being trimmed for efficiency. I picked up the envelope. Anything else? Claudia smiled in that practiced, polished way that never reached her eyes. Just know this wasn't personal. It was personal. Of course it was. I'd been sidelined for months, meetings I wasn't invited to, decisions made without my input, interns showing up with concepts that looked like recycled press releases from Tesla's motorcycle experiments. I didn't argue. Just stood up, nodded to the HR rep, and walked out of the building I'd basically lived in for the last decade. Outside, the Oregon sky was overcast. Of course it was. I sat in my truck for a while, the severance folder still in my hand. I didn't open it. I knew what it said. The numbers didn't matter. Not really. It was the message underneath that counted. You're obsolete. 7 years. Gone like nothing. On the way home, I passed the dealership lot where the old Ridgeback series still sat under spotlights, the same ones I built from the ground up. The models we tested in rain and desert and freezing wind, the ones the riders sent postcards about, mud-streaked, dented, loved. Now they were outdated, according to Claudia's new vision board. A vision that didn't have room for me. When I pulled into my driveway, my neighbor Pete gave me a wave from across the street. I waved back, managing half a smile. He didn't know yet. Nobody did. Inside the house, I dropped the envelope on the kitchen table and opened the fridge. The beer was warm. I drank it anyway. For a while, I just stood there, staring out the window at the trees behind the yard. I used to clear trails back there with my grandfather when I was a kid. He taught me how to weld on a folding table in that garage. Taught me what a real machine was supposed to feel like, not how it looked, but how it moved, how it responded when the terrain pushed back. Now none of that mattered. Now it was about lines and surfaces, showroom pop, green forward aesthetics. Whatever the hell that meant. My phone buzzed. A message from Wes, one of the welders still at the shop. Dude, just heard. What the actual hell? They just killed the heart of this place. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. They want someone prettier. Guess I wasn't photogenic enough. No reply. Not yet. I looked around my house, walls covered in framed trail maps, engine blueprints, a few old helmets, and tried to imagine what the hell I was supposed to do next. Because everything I'd built was gone. Not because I failed, but because someone else thought I didn't fit anymore. And somehow, the worst part wasn't the firing. The worst part was that I saw it coming. And I let it happen anyway. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept bouncing between anger and something worse, doubt. By the time the sun came up, I was already in the garage. The same garage my grandfather used to work out of when I was a kid. The walls were still lined with pegboards, each tool hanging in its place like it belonged to a museum. Wrenches, calipers, old welding masks. The smell of oil and dust and metal still clung to the air like it had never left. I pulled open one of the old drawers and found it, my sketchbook. The one I'd started when I first got hired at Redstone, back when I still believed good ideas were enough. The pages were full of the things that never made it past the executive floor. Concepts that got marked as not viable, too rugged, or off-brand. I flipped through them, page by page, and each drawing felt like a piece of myself I'd slowly buried over the years. There was one in particular that made me pause. A dual-mode off-road system, built for adaptive terrain response. No touchscreen, no Bluetooth. Just solid engineering. Trail-first design. I'd pitched it twice. Both times, it got tabled before the second meeting. I sat back on the stool, rubbing my hand over my jaw, and all I could think about was my grandfather. He used to say, "A good bike don't care what it looks like, just that it gets you there and back again." That was the heart of what I'd always believed. That's what Redstone used to believe. Before they started hiring brand consultants and design firms to tell them what dirt should look like. Back when I was a kid, Grandpa would let me hold the flashlight while he repaired old bicycle frames for neighbors. He'd hand me a grease rag and say, "Learn the feel before the fix." It was his way of making sure I understood things with my hands, not just my eyes. I spent every summer in this garage, learning how to build. Not just parts, systems, balance, grit. He built me a custom mountain bike when I was 12. We welded the frame together with mismatched tubing, and it still handled better than anything we could have bought off a shelf. I hadn't thought about that bike in years. When I got to Redstone, the company was bleeding. Sales were down, and the market was shifting. They had good branding, but no real identity. I was brought in to revamp the engineering division, and I dove in headfirst, 16-hour days, field tests in the Cascades, countless late nights tearing apart demo units until we got it right. The Ridgeback series changed everything. Riders loved it because it worked. It was ugly by showroom standards, sure, but it rode like a dream. It won races. It brought in revenue. We even made it into Off-Road Riders Bike of the Year issue 3 years running. And now? Now Claudia was calling it a relic. I got up and walked into the house, grabbing a box from the closet where I'd stashed old files and flash drives. Inside were folders with Redstone letterheads, internal reviews, feedback forms, early concept art. I flipped through them quickly, pulling out every design that had been labeled non-conforming. Every schematic I'd been quietly proud of, but told to refine. That's when my phone buzzed again. A text from Wes. "They had the gall to announce your retirement this morning. Like it was your choice." I stared at the screen. Retirement. That word hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't old. I wasn't tired. I was just inconvenient. I shot back a reply. "Guess they wanted me to leave quietly." Wes responded almost immediately. "Screw that. You built this place. Without you, it's just another nameplate." I set the phone down and looked around the room. My walls were filled with memories of machines that had soul. Awards I never hung. Rider thank you letters I'd saved. Mudstreak photos from the Baja 500. Guys holding up helmets next to Ridgebacks with busted fenders and huge grins. They weren't smiling because the bike was sleek. They were smiling because the bike survived with them. That's when it hit me. Redstone hadn't just fired me. They'd fired what they used to be. And I'd been letting them drift that way for a long time. Trying to compromise, trying to fit in, trying to believe that maybe trend chasing wasn't the betrayal it felt like. But it was. It absolutely was. I picked up one of the old designs, traced my finger along the lines, and finally said it out loud. They killed the heart of this place. And maybe that meant it was time to build something new. Something with a pulse again. I hadn't talked to Jaden in over a year, but when I called, he picked up on the second ring. "Logan." His voice had that same calm, sandpaper drawl it always did. "Either you finally bought a canyon ride or someone died." "Neither," I said. I got canned. There was a pause, just long enough for the wait to register. "Shit," he said finally. "Redstone." "Yeah." "Claudia." "Yeah." "Damn," he muttered. I heard she was shaking things up, but I didn't think she was dumb enough to let you go. I sat in the garage, sketchbook open in my lap, one of my old concept prints spread out on the bench beside me. She said the company needs someone who understands electric and eco-luxury trends. Jaden snorted. "Trends don't get you out of the Mojave at midnight with a cracked rear axle. You okay?" I hesitated. "I've been better." There was a pause, then a rustle on the other end of the line. "You want to talk shop or vent?" Bit of both. That turned into a 2-hour call. I told him everything. About Claudia, the severance, the design rejections. About the sketchbooks. The prototypes that never saw daylight. He didn't say much for a while, just listened. Then he said something that flipped a switch in me. "Logan," he said, "you know your NDA doesn't cover anything they passed on, right?" I blinked. "Wait, what?" "If they didn't use it, they don't own it. It's standard. You sure you don't have a non-compete?" I got up and grabbed the envelope from the kitchen table, flipping through the paperwork. Termination clause is clean. No non-compete. Just an IP clause that only covers implemented systems. Well, there you go. I sat back down slowly. "Holy shit. I've been telling Priya about your modular design for years," he added. "She always thought it was vaporware." "It's not." "I know it's not. Send it to me." It took me 5 minutes to scan in the schematics. I bundled everything. Notes, sketches, CAD renders I'd mocked up at home after hours. Systems for a new adventure series that could swap between modes on the fly, trail, sand, snow, even urban street. All mechanical. All field-tuned. No gimmicks. I called it the Forge series, back when I thought Redstone would take it seriously. I hit send. Jaden messaged me 2 minutes later. "Holy shit, this is solid. Sending it to Priya now." I figured I'd hear back in a few days, if at all. Instead, The email landed in my inbox exactly 37 minutes later. From Priya Nand. Subject, Modular Off-Road Series. Immediate interest. Hi Logan. Jaden just shared your Ford schematics. This is some of the most exciting off-road innovation I've seen in years. If this is half as functional as it looks, we need to talk. Can you come in tomorrow? Say 9 a.m. Priya. I stared at the screen, rereading the words 3 times. Then I leaned back in my chair, my pulse pounding in my ears. This was real. I replied, I'll be there. Then I stood up, walked into the garage, and pulled the tarp off my old prototype mock-up. The one I'd started building on weekends just to feel like an engineer again. It still had dust on it. Still had my fingerprints in the welds. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. I grabbed a rag, wiped down the seat, and for the first time in months, I felt something that had been missing. A spark. Maybe Redstone had thrown me out. But the work, the real work, was still alive. And now it finally had somewhere to go. The Canyon Ride campus sat just outside of Boise, tucked between a tech park and the foothills. Sleek glass buildings, solar panels lining every roof, and a sculpture of a twisting motorcycle frame out front that looked like it belonged in a museum. I parked my truck in the visitor lot, checked my watch, 8:47 a.m., and took a breath before heading inside. I had the forged schematics printed and rolled in a tube under my arm, plus a USB backup in my jacket pocket, just in case. The receptionist was a guy named Tim, probably 23, with a sleeve of tattoos and a Canyon Ride hoodie. He handed me a guest badge without even asking my name. They're waiting for you, Mr. Hayes, he said, nodding toward the elevator. Second floor, design wing. Straight through to the red doors. The walls upstairs were lined with frame mock-ups and concept art. Everything was open, no cubicles, just long tables full of parts, wires, clay models, and tools that hadn't been tucked away for aesthetics. The kind of place where people actually built things. When I stepped through the red doors, Priya was already there with a team of 6, including Jaden, who gave me a half grin from behind a drafting screen. Logan Hayes, Priya said, standing. We've been waiting for this. She looked like the kind of person who didn't waste time. Dark jeans, boots, her sleeves rolled to the elbows. Her eyes scanned me the same way I used to scan trail reports before a race. She didn't care about polish. She was trying to figure out if I could deliver. I dropped the printouts on the table and got straight to it. The Forge series is built around modular adaptability, I said, unrolling the pages. Every core frame shares the same architecture, but each terrain kit is a bolt-on solution. Suspension swap-outs, torque calibration modules, chain-to-belt converters. I kept it mechanical where it counts, so even in the field, you can switch setups in under 10 minutes. No software dependency, no fragile electronics. One of the engineers leaned in. You did all this without digital mapping? I nodded. You don't need GPS to get out of a sand pit. You need traction and balance. Jaden chuckled under his breath. Told you he doesn't do fluff. Priya studied the diagram, tapping her finger over the rear linkage system. And this weight distribution, is this based on the Ridgeback geometry? An evolution of it, I said. That system handled beautifully in Baja, but I reshaped the upper triangle to distribute load better on steep ascents. She nodded, slowly. Then she looked around the table. Thoughts? One of the designers, a woman named Marisol, said, it's brutal and brilliant. We could actually market this to both long-distance riders and entry-level off-roaders. Another guy said, the modular approach solves our storage issues for domestic shipping. We could flat-pack the kits. I stayed quiet, just watching them dig into it. Not just nodding politely, but actually thinking. Not once did anyone ask how it would photograph under showroom lights. Priya looked back at me. Logan, if you come on board, this becomes your project. Full design lead. We fast-track prototyping in 6 weeks with testing by early fall. I blinked. That's soon. We've been sitting on budget space, waiting for the right concept. This is it. I looked at Jaden, who gave a small nod like, told you so. And compensation? I asked carefully. You'd get royalties on each unit sold, Priya said, sliding a draft offer across the table. Creative control. Full team autonomy. No fluff. No layers. We just build. I scanned the paper. The numbers made my throat tighten. It was better than anything Redstone had ever offered, and they were giving me ownership. Not a seat at the table. My own table. I'm in, I said. No big speech. Just the truth. That night, I didn't go out to celebrate. I went home, pulled out my grandfather's toolbox, and got to work. The next few days were a blur. I met with their prototype team, walked through the machine shop, and redrew the frame geometry to fit their machining specs. We sourced parts from our best suppliers and started ordering aluminum composites that could survive a 100-degree desert or a snowpack trail at 10,000 feet. And then, Thursday morning, I got the email. Subject, cease and desist notification, IP misconduct allegation. From Redstone Legal Affairs. I sat at my desk, reading it twice. Claudia's name was in the CC line. The message was clear. They were accusing me of stealing intellectual property, of sabotaging internal systems before I left, of using unauthorized designs in my work with Canyon Ride. My hands tightened around the armrests. Not out of fear. Out of fury. I called Priya, forwarded her the email, and said, "Looks like they're trying to spook me." She didn't flinch. "Let them try," she said. "We've got the schematics, the email records, and the timestamps. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." I smiled, just a little. This time, I wasn't alone. And this time, they'd picked the wrong engineer to underestimate. The next day, I got a call from an unfamiliar Oregon number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. Then another. By the third one, I recognized the voice. Karen Deloach, Redstone's head of legal. I finally listened. "Logan," she said, her voice tight with fake concern. "We've been reviewing some process documentation from your last few months here. And, well, there are some irregularities. Claudia would appreciate a chance to discuss these informally before it escalates." I didn't call back. The fourth voicemail came from Claudia herself. "Logan, we've discovered significant gaps in your engineering logs. Your documentation was incomplete, almost intentionally. I want to believe this wasn't deliberate sabotage, but if you've left your former team compromised, that's something we'll have to act on." Sabotage? I stared at my phone and laughed. An actual, sharp laugh, the kind you let out when the absurdity finally tips over into comedy. They were trying to paint me as a rogue. I called Jaden. "They're accusing me of leaving undocumented systems. Says I sabotaged the team." "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "That's desperate. I think she's hoping I panic and back off the Forge rollout." Jaden paused. "You want me to reach out to the old man?" I knew who he meant. Alan Vickers, Redstone's former CEO. The one who'd brought me in 7 years ago. The one Claudia had replaced. "Yeah," I said. "Tell him I need 30 minutes. Coffee. No lawyers." We met 2 days later at a diner off Highway 97. Same place we used to grab post-ride breakfast back in the day. He was already there when I walked in, sipping a black coffee and reading the local paper like he didn't have a care in the world. When he saw me, he gave a sad smile. "Logan. Alan." He motioned for me to sit. "So, they're accusing you of blowing up the engine room on your way out." "Pretty much." He sighed, folding the paper. "Claudia's got her strategy. Create noise, cast out, stay on offense." "She's playing scared," I said. "Of course she is. She's watching Canyon Ride poach the engineer that built her best-selling model. She has to make it look like you were the problem." I leaned in. "You know that team inside and out. Did I ever leave anything undocumented?" "Not a damn thing." He tapped the table with his knuckle. "But that doesn't matter, does it? She's not looking for the truth. She's looking for a headline. Lead engineer leaves chaos behind. Gets her out in front of it." I studied his face. Same guy who once told me, "Don't build for shareholders. Build for riders. The stock will follow." "What would you do?" I asked. He stirred his coffee. "Make noise back." I got up, nodded once. "Thanks, Alan." "I'd stay quiet," he added, almost as an afterthought. "For the sake of your reputation." That stopped me. I turned back. "Excuse me. You're doing well now. Why get dragged into a pissing match? Just let it go." "No," I said calmly. "Not this time." Back at Canyon Ride, I walked straight into the legal office and laid the phone down on the desk. "You want to go to war?" I told Priya. "Let's go to war." She nodded. Over the next 48 hours, we built the file. I had every design submission Redstone had ever rejected. Every meeting timestamp. Every email showing my concepts had been dismissed for being too niche, too rugged, too off-brand. My Canyon Ride design packet had a clean trail from start to finish proven to be mine, built entirely on my own equipment, with documented timestamps before I ever filed exit paperwork. We didn't just defend. We went on offense. Canyon Ride's legal team sent Redstone a formal rebuttal with a copy of every rejected schematic and an attached timeline. They warned Redstone that any further defamatory claims would result in countersuit, including damages for interference with contractual relationships. They backed down within hours. A single-sentence reply from Redstone's general counsel. "We consider the matter closed." That night, I got one final email from Claudia. Just 3 lines. "Logan, I regret that this had to turn ugly. I hope, for your sake, it ends here." I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. Then I forwarded it straight to Canyon Ride's legal team. "Flag this. Just in case." Priya met me in the prototype bay that evening. The shop lights were humming, and the first Forge test frame was bolted to the assembly rig. She stood next to it, arms folded, staring at the matte black chassis like it was a sculpture. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. "Better than I've been in years." She smiled slightly. "They tried to shake you. You didn't flinch." "They always underestimated me," I said. "Well," she said, reaching for a wrench, "their mistake." We tightened the final bolts together. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't defending my legacy. I was building the next one. It was Jaden who broke the news. He barged into my workshop just after 9 on a Monday morning, his phone held out like it was radioactive. "Logan," he said, voice tight. "You need to see this." He handed me the screen. The file was a leaked marketing brief, watermarked confidential, for internal review only. Redstone letterhead. I skimmed the header and my blood went cold. The Horizon Series, modular trail performance for the next generation. I flipped to the next page and stared at the diagram. They'd lifted the entire forge architecture, frame skeleton, terrain kits, even the rear suspension bridge. The only thing they'd changed was the name and the paint. Every damn line. Every spec. Everything they'd laughed off for 2 years. Claudia was launching my rejected designs as her next flagship. "Unbelievable," I muttered. "It gets worse," Jaden said. "Check the bottom." I scrolled. Lead innovation credit. Trevor Langford, VP of Future Mobility. Trevor. The guy Claudia poached from some luxury EV startup last fall. The guy who wore loafers to design meetings and once asked if tire tread could be streamlined for aesthetics. He was taking credit for my work. Jaden sat down heavily on the bench beside me. I asked around. "They've already scheduled a Horizon launch event. 8 weeks out." I exhaled slowly, setting the phone down. "That's not going to happen." "Damn right it's not." I walked straight to Priya's office with the brief printed out in my hand. She was reviewing prototype test data, but when I dropped the file on her desk, she knew it was serious. She flipped through the first few pages. Her jaw clenched. "Are they insane?" she said. "This is theft." "It's war," I said. She didn't blink. Then we hit first. By that afternoon, Canyon Ride's executive team voted unanimously to move up our timeline. The Forge series would launch before Horizon ever saw a press release. We fast-tracked everything: branding, supply chain, media outreach. The PR department rolled out teaser ads with aerial shots of the frame skeleton under firelight. We scheduled interviews with Trail and Tread and Ride Gear Weekly. We greenlit a multi-stage demo tour across Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. And most importantly, we issued a legal warning to Redstone. Any similarities between Horizon and the Forge architecture would be treated as evidence of willful infringement. Attached was a 22-page dossier proving prior authorship. That evening, Priya met me in the loading bay, where the first Forge units were being packed for testing. "We're moving launch up to 6 weeks," she said. "You okay with that?" I tightened a bolt on the frame and nodded. "Yeah, let's bury them." A few days later, the Canyon Ride marketing team held a press event at a test course in Moab. Reviewers and influencers were invited to ride the pre-release models. I stood off to the side as they tore through red rock and sand, yelling with excitement as they switched terrain kits in under 10 minutes. No one asked about luxury finishes. No one mentioned aesthetics. They talked about feel, about power to weight, about handling on loose shale. When the last group finished their ride, one of the journalists walked up to me, grinning wide. "You the guy behind this?" "I am. This thing's a beast. It's like the Ridgeback Roof." I smiled. That was the idea. The next day, Canyon Ride's press release went live. Full credit line at the top. Introducing the Forge series, engineered by Logan Hayes. Trail tested. Field hardened. Built for the real world. That same morning, Redstone's social team posted a teaser for Horizon. The comments lit up with comparisons. Side-by-sides. Call-outs. "Didn't Logan Hayes design this like 3 years ago? Looks like Redstone found the recycle bin. Forge already launched and looks better. Why even try?" By the end of the week, Horizon's release page had been quietly pulled offline. I knew Claudia wouldn't let it go, but I also knew she'd been caught. They tried to bury me under the designs they rejected. Instead, I built a legacy out of their garbage. And now, it was my name on the frame, my design on the trail, and theirs in the rear view. We called it the War Room, but it was really just the second-floor production bay we cleared out and filled with whiteboards, parts, and prototypes. That's where I lived for the next 6 weeks, inside the hum of machinery, surrounded by grease, chatter, and the electric buzz of something real being born. I wasn't just running things from a desk. I was right there on the floor with the assembly team, pulling wrenches, checking torque specs, laying out wiring harnesses when the electrical crew fell behind. I slept 4 hours a night, ate standing up, and didn't shave for weeks. It was the best I'd felt in years. You learn a lot about a team when you're sweating with them. The younger techs, most of them under 30, were skeptical at first. Probably thought I was another paper pusher parachuting in with fancy titles and no clue. But once they saw me on my knees with grease-stained gloves, fixing a bent radiator bracket instead of barking orders, things changed. A guy named Eli, quiet, heavy-set, smart as hell, pulled me aside one night around 11. "No offense, man," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, "but we've had leads before. Mostly guys who talk big and disappear the second the work gets real." I nodded. "Yeah, I've worked with those guys." He studied me for a second. "You're different. That's the plan. We pushed the Forge series into final assembly a week ahead of schedule. We field-tested prototypes across 5 states in varying altitudes, temperatures, terrain types. Canyon Ride's drone team captured every moment. Slides through gravel, snow kit swaps in under 7 minutes, frame stress tests under brutal downhill impacts. None of the bikes failed. Not once. And then, right on cue, Claudia tried to rattle the cage. It started with an email. No letterhead. No signature. Just a veiled threat. We're aware of your Forge testing activities. You should be careful what you rush to market. Remember what happened to certain Ridgeback frames in 2018? Rushing durability costs reputations. Just a friendly heads up. I stared at the screen. Not a lawsuit. Not even a real warning. Just noise. I forwarded it to Canyon Ride's legal team. Subject line, desperation. They responded with a brief note. Documented. Logged. No action needed unless she escalates. Priya called me a few minutes later. You good? Yeah, I said. She's fishing. Nothing to bite. We rolled on. Forge units began rolling off the line. 10 per day, then 20, then 30. I walked every finished bike down the inspection track myself. Ran fingers along the weld seams. Checked chain tension, gear ratios, suspension responsiveness. If a bike didn't ride like something I'd take through Utah blindfolded, it got flagged. Nobody argued. They knew this wasn't about speed anymore. This was about truth. Canyon Ride's media team started ramping up their campaign. They ran side-by-side video comparisons of the Forge and the leaked Horizon specs. Our frame was 20% lighter. Our terrain kits swapped in half the time. Our load distribution handled vertical drop impacts up to 12 feet without damage. Then came the tagline. Real riders. Real roads. Real Forge. Redstone stayed silent. Too silent. Until a week before our launch. That's when a handful of motorcycle forums lit up with anonymous posts trashing Canyon Ride. Heard Forge bikes are untested garbage. Forge is just Ridgeback 2.0. Same old SHD, different badge. Hayes isn't even a real engineer. He was demoted before Redstone cut him loose. Jaden called me. They're trying to poison the well. Let him try, I said. It's not going to stop us. And it didn't. We finalized the Forge series launch event for early October, 1 full month before Horizon's planned debut. Live-streamed, full demo rides, media hands-on, and open field rider trials. We booked an off-road park in southern Utah and gave every invited guest a full terrain kit with a challenge map. And that night, walking through the warehouse, watching the bikes lined up in rows like soldiers before deployment, I felt it. The calm before the storm. But this time, I wasn't bracing for failure. I was ready. We weren't trying to prove we could win. We were proving they already lost. The Forge series launch wasn't just a success. It was a shockwave. By noon on launch day, every single media outlet in the adventure and off-road world had something to say about the Forge. Reviewers who'd ridden it for 15 minutes were already calling it the most intuitive ride in a generation. YouTubers posted side-by-side breakdowns comparing Forge's terrain modularity to everything else on the market, and nothing came close. The phrase Logan Hayes Revenge Tour started trending on biker forums. It wasn't meant as a joke, because it wasn't just the design they praised, it was the philosophy. Real riders, real function. No showroom glitter. No hollow branding. Just bikes that worked like they were supposed to. Forge had taken the soul of the old Ridgeback and upgraded it with fire. Canyon Ride stock surged 8 points by the end of the week. We couldn't keep up with the pre-orders. The first run sold out in 24 hours. And for the first time since this entire mess began, I finally saw my name in print, credited, in bold, on the Canyon Ride website. Designed by Logan Hayes, Director of Advanced Systems Engineering. It hit different seeing it in writing. After years of being treated like an interchangeable part, I finally felt like I owned something. And Redstone? They went quiet. Uncomfortably quiet. No press release. No launch teaser. Just radio silence. Then came the leaks. Forum users started sharing grainy screenshots of the Horizon prototypes. One writer noted the exposed cable routing looked identical to an early Forge draft I had sketched back in 2022. Another broke down the geometry line by line and matched it against my original Ridgeback derivative concepts. Redstone's cover story started to crumble. Fast. The tipping point came when Off-Road Weekly ran an expose. Horizon or Mirage? Industry insiders questioned Redstone's timeline after Forge dominance. The article quoted former Redstone staff, people who left quietly after Claudia took over, who confirmed that my Forge designs had circulated internally for years and were dismissed as too utilitarian. Now they were rebranded as cutting edge by someone else, and the industry wasn't buying it. Redstone's Instagram got buried in comments. Didn't Logan Hayes design this already? Forge beat you to your own design. Yikes. When plagiarism fails, try innovation. Claudia tried to do damage control with a leaked memo, a bland, corporate response about convergent innovation and parallel development. It didn't work, because writers knew the truth, and they were loud about it. Then the unthinkable happened. Redstone postponed the Horizon launch indefinitely. The press announcement was vague. Supply chain adjustments. Internal realignment. But everyone knew they couldn't release Horizon without facing a firestorm of legal and reputational backlash. That same afternoon, I got a voicemail. Blocked number. Short. Sharp. Claudia's voice, flat and hollow. I hope you're proud of yourself, Logan. You burned the whole damn thing down. For what? Credit? Ego? I gave you everything, and you turned it into a crusade. You won. You happy? I didn't respond. What would I even say? This wasn't about being happy. This was about truth. About all the years I sat quietly while they stripped the meaning out of the work, put polish over performance, and called it progress. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. That weekend, I stood on a rise at the Utah launch site, watching a Forge unit tackle a boulder-strewn incline in snow tires with full rider gear and a tank bag mount installed. The rider made it up with ease, whooping the whole way. And behind me, a cameraman turned to me and said, "This whole thing feels different. Like, real." I just nodded. Because that was the point. We didn't just launch a bike. We launched a standard. And somewhere behind closed doors, I imagined Claudia pacing in a room full of silence, realizing her story no longer mattered. Because this time, everyone finally heard mine. A month after the Forge launch, I got called into a meeting I hadn't asked for. Priya met me outside her office, holding a manila envelope and smiling in that small, satisfied way she did when things were about to shift. "You've been too quiet," she said. "Come on." I stepped inside and saw Canyon Ride COO, head of finance, and a guy from legal I barely knew, all waiting around a long table. I thought maybe we were doing a post-mortem on the launch, metrics, analytics, the usual backpatting. Instead, Priya slid the envelope toward me. "Effective immediately," she said, "you're being promoted to Director of Advanced Engineering." I blinked. "You serious? We wouldn't be here if not for you, Logan." The Forge series didn't just sell. It redefined what a modular system can be. Our competitors are scrambling. And your team? They'd follow you anywhere. Inside the envelope was a new contract, a significant bump in salary, full royalties on the Forge series, and a development stipend for future prototypes on my own schedule, with full R&D autonomy. I ran a hand through my hair, still a little stunned. I'm not used to people actually saying thank you. "Well," she said, "get used to it." The next week, I bought a new truck. Not flashy, just something that could haul a trailer and still handle a rocky descent without sounding like it might come apart. Then I got to work building out a mentorship program with the younger engineers on my team, Eli, Tam, Jordan, and a few others. It felt good. Solid. Like I wasn't just building machines anymore. I was building people. I had this moment, sitting with Eli in the break room, where he asked me straight out, "How do you know when an idea is worth fighting for?" I smiled and said, "When they try to bury it." My Forge series royalty checks arrived the following Friday. Bigger than any bonus I ever got at Redstone. Hell, bigger than my old salary. I stared at the deposit for a while, then laughed. Not out of greed. Out of relief. Because it wasn't just about the money. It meant I'd built something no one else could claim. And then, 2 months after launch, it happened. I was at a trade show in Las Vegas, walking the showroom floor between booths, answering questions, shaking hands. People stopped me for photos. Young engineers asked for career advice. Dealers asked about expansion kits. It felt like standing in the middle of something I had always watched from a distance and finally being allowed inside. That's when I saw her, Claudia, standing alone near the back of a mostly empty Redstone booth. No press, no buzz, no foot traffic. Just a half-finished Horizon frame mounted behind her, looking like a relic in the museum of a company that had run out of stories to tell. She spotted me instantly. For a second, I thought she might turn away. But she didn't. She walked toward me, heels clicking like always, posture perfect. But the confidence wasn't there. "Not really. Logan," she said, like it was a test. "Claudia." She glanced around. "Well, I guess it worked out for you." I nodded. "It did. I still think what you did was extreme," she added. "You could have stayed. You could have adapted." I tilted my head. Adapted to what? Selling knockoffs of my own work? She winced, just barely. "I didn't think it would go like this." "You never do," I said. "That's the problem." For a moment, she looked almost human. Not calculating. Not guarded. Just tired. "You built something real," she admitted. "And I didn't see it." I could have rubbed it in. Could have told her she threw away the one thing that kept her company honest. But I didn't. I just said, "I know." She looked away. "You ever think about what would have happened if we'd figured it out? You and me, the company, Forge under the Redstone name." "Yeah," I said. "It would have sold. And I'd still be invisible." She nodded slowly. That was it. No dramatic exit. No apology. Just an old rival finally standing in the wreckage of her own decisions and realizing it was hers alone to carry. I walked away before she could say anything else. Back toward my booth. Back toward my team. Because I wasn't chasing acceptance anymore. I had already earned it. It was a quiet Friday when the package showed up. No return address. Just my name written in careful handwriting across the top. Looked like it had been handled a few times too many, corners bent, the tape starting to peel. The kind of box someone second-guessed sending, then sent anyway. Inside were my old sketchbooks. The ones I thought were still locked in the bottom drawer of my old redstone office. Tucked between the pages was a note, short and simple. Found these during a cleanup. Figured they should be with the one who actually filled them. Wes. I sat on the edge of my workbench and flipped through them slowly. Pages stained with coffee, corner smudges from late-night pencil work, sketches of frames I never built, suspension systems I abandoned too early, forgotten scraps of things I hadn't looked at in years. Halfway through the second notebook, I paused. There it was, something I'd sketched long before Forge ever existed. A modular electric conversion kit. Simple design. Frame-integrated battery spine. Bolt-on motor system. Swappable battery blocks for backcountry refueling, solar-compatible. Meant for off-road riders who didn't want to give up their gas bikes, but were willing to experiment. I'd labeled it Project Ember. I stared at it, my mind already jumping. Back then, the tech hadn't caught up. The batteries were too bulky, the motor weight too high. But now? Now, it could work. Really work. I stood up and grabbed my phone, dialing without thinking. Priya, I said when she answered. You free? Sort of, she replied. What's up? I've got something new. A pause. How new? I looked back at the sketch. Old idea. New timing. I heard her smile through the phone. How soon can you get me a prototype? I grinned. Soon as I clear off my bench. We met that weekend in the Canyon Ride R&D garage. No press, no planning deck, no suits. Just the two of us and a pile of components. I laid out the rough plans, walked her through the battery integration, the torque mapping, the field recharging module. She didn't say much. Just nodded. Then finally, Logan, if this works. It will. She looked at me. You want to call it Forge 2? I shook my head. No. This one's something else. And it was. Because this wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It wasn't about Claudia, or Horizon, or Redstone, or reputation. This was about building. About doing the thing that first pulled me into a workshop when I was a kid, sitting next to my grandfather with grease on my hands, watching him turn broken parts into something that worked again. The industry didn't need another revenge story. It needed an answer. Something honest. Something that rode hard, rode quiet, and still left a trail behind. By Monday, the project had a name, Ember. By Tuesday, the prototype was underway. And by Friday, we had rider interest from 3 continents. It turns out, people were ready. Not for noise, but for movement. That night, I sat alone in my garage, the Ember frame clamped into place, half-assembled. My old sketchbook sat open beside it, the pencil lines still shaky from that long-forgotten night. I could have chased payback. Could have soaked in the spotlight until it faded. Instead, I picked up a wrench and kept going. Because the road doesn't end when they shut a door behind you. It starts when you stop needing to knock.